Now let us start another new series, video series. In this, we are going to discuss about history and politics. So let us see the first video in as part of history and politics genre. The top 10 fascinating facts about slavery. Number 10. Established in Virginia. Slavery was officially established in Virginia in 1654 when Anthony Johnson, a black man, convinced a court that his servant, also black, John Kaiser, was his for life. Johnson himself had been brought to Virginia some years earlier as an indentured servant, a person who must work to repay a debt or on contract for so many years in exchange for food and shelter. But he saved enough money to buy out the remainder of his contract and that of his wife. The court ruled in Johnson's favor, and the very first officially state recognized slave existed in Virginia. Johnson eventually became very wealthy and began importing his own black slaves from Africa, for which he was granted 250 acres at the time. Any person importing a slave would be paid 50 acres per person. Eventually, the unfortunate repercussions of the decision would come back to haunt Johnson when his land was confiscated and given to a white man because Johnson was a Negro and by consequence an alien. So, this was the 10th fascinating fact about the slavery. Next thing is 9. Disastrous invention. In the second part of the 18th century, slavery was beginning to despair naturally in the United States of as farmers were planting crops that required far less manual work. Many slave owners freed their slaves, and it began to look like slavery would die out completely. But things were to change. In 1793, Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, a device for processing raw cotton. This meant that a single man could process 50 times more cotton in a day than previously, making cotton a huge money making crop. So this was the another invention, this disastrous invention to break the slavery happened in 1793 by Eli Whitney. Anyway, let us see the eighth. The word slave comes to us from the Byzantine Greek word sklavos. Greek word sklavos, which was a name for Slavic people. And the reason for this is that the Vikings used to capture the slaves and sell them to the Romans as slaves. The seventh one is the Bible and slavery. The Bible does not expressly condone or forbid slavery. In the New Testament, Jesus heals a slave and commends his owner for his faith. He does not take the time to condemn the slave owner for having a slave, nor at any point does he try to suggest that slavery is wrong. Number 6. Lad of the Free. Liberia is a small nation on the west coast of Africa surrounded by Sierra Leone, the Ivory Coast, Guinea, and the Atlantic Ocean. In 1822, Liberia was founded as a colony by American slaves who had been freed. So thankful were the slaves for the efforts of President James Monroe that they named their new capital city after him, Monrovia. Next thing is number 5, a mark of honor. In Africa, prior to the arrival of European slave traders, slavery was a normal part of life. The thing that makes it stand out from European style slavery was the fact that it was a sign of good reputation and honor if a slave owner treated his slaves with respect and kindness. Number 4, Charles Lynch. Charles Lynch was a farmer and American revolutionary from Virginia. During the American Revolution, he headed an irregular court which tried and punished loyalist supporters of the British. The sentences handed down were usually property seizure, flogging, or conscription into the army. Number 3, ancient practice. Slavery is an ancient practice. It is referred to in man's earliest records, such as the Code of Hammurabi in 1760 BC, the earliest known law code from Babylon. Number 2, papal permission and prohibition. While the Catholic Church has repeatedly condemned the idea of slavery, there was a short period in the 15th and 16th centuries when it was allowed by special papal permission. The Pope who gave permission was Pope Nicholas V in 1452 when he issued a special bull allowing King Afonso V of Portugal to enslave pagans caught during wars. The pertinent text is like that. In 1537, Pope Paul III returned to the traditional anti-slavery view of the church. Number 1, slavery today. According to studies done by anti-slavery groups, there are currently more slaves today than at any time in history. Three quarters are female and over half are children. It is believed that there are around 27 million people in slavery right now. So, these are the top 10 fascinating facts about the slavery. Let us see in this video another top 10 worst plagues in history. Number 10, Moscow plague and riot happened in 1771. The Moscow plague progressed from its initial appearance to full-blown epidemic between late 1770 and the spring of 1771. Although city authorities took the usual steps of epidemic control, such as forced quarantines and confiscations, destruction of contaminated property, the city's population reacted with uncontrolled anger, fear, and paranoia. Number 9, Great Plague of Marshalless happened in 1722. The Great Plague of Marshalless arrived in 1720 and became one of the most significant outbreaks of bubonic plague in the 18th century. It spread throughout the city and the surrounding provinces, killing 100,000. It was nearly controlled through legislation. The Act of Parliament of AX made it punishable by death for anyone to cross between Marshals and province. Number 8, Antonine Plague in 165 to 180 AD. The Antonine Plague of the Roman Empire was also called the Plague of Galen. It was likely smallpox or measles and was probably brought back by returning Roman soldiers from Near East campaigns. The Antonine Plague was so named because it claimed the lives of two Roman emperors with the family name of Antonine. Number 7, Plague of Athens, 430 to 427 BC. The Plague of Athens struck disastrously when the Athenians under Pericles were in the second year of the Peloponnesian war against the Spartans. The full sweep of the plague was felt throughout the eastern Mediterranean, including Sparta, but was particularly devastating inside the walls of the Athens, probably entering through the Athens port of Piraeus. Number 6, the Great Plague of Milan, 1629 to 1631. The Italian plague or the Great Plague of Milan was actually a small series of bubonic plague outbreaks in northern Italy, covering 2 years and costing 280,000 lives. The highest death tolls were in Lombardy and Venice. Although Milan lost almost half of its 130,000 population, the disease was brought initially to Mantua by German and French troops as part of the 30 Years' War and then spread rapidly into the Venetian troops who retreated into northern and central Italy and took to the disease with them. Number 5, American plagues, 16th century. Since indigenous people of North and South America remained isolated from Europe, Asia, and Africa for tens of thousands of years, they had no natural immunities to many common European diseases. Although many of these diseases were minor inconveniences, some of them were devastating, especially measles and smallpox. Number 4, the Great Plague of London happened in 1665-1666. The Great Plague of London killed anywhere between 75,000 to 1 lakh people, which was fully one fifth of the total London population of that time. Number 3, Plague of Justinian, 541 to 542. The Plague of Justinian was named after the Byzantine ruler at the time of the initial outbreak, Emperor Justinian I, and it was enormous in scope. The plague, most probably bubonic plague, infected the capital of Constantinople and stretched throughout the South Asia, North Africa, Arabia, and Europe. Number 2, the third pandemic, 1855 to 1950s. Third pandemic began in the Yunnan province of China in 1855 and was considered active by the World Health Organization until 1959, when its deaths finally dropped below 200 per year. Number 1, the Black Death happened in 1347 to 1351. The Black Death or Black Plague and the bubonic plague are all names for the same deadly pandemic that claimed approximately 75 million people worldwide, including 25 to 30 million in Europe alone. It is believed to be caused by the bacterium uh, Yersinia pestis and spread to the humans throughout the fleas of infected ground rodents. Although the origins of the plague are disputed, it no doubt leaped into Europe from Crimea in the 1340s. So these are the top 10 worst plagues in history of the world. In this video, let us see the top 10 myths about the Middle Ages. Number 10, death penalty myth. The death penalty was common in the Middle Ages. Despite what many people believe, the Middle Ages gave birth to the jury system, and trials were, in fact, very fair. The death penalty was considered to be extremely severe and was used only in the worst cases of crimes like murder, treason, and arson. Number 9. Locked Bibles myth. Bibles were locked away to keep the people from seeing the true word. This is a myth. During the Middle Ages, until Gutenberg came along, all books had to be written by hand. This was a painstaking task which took many months, particularly with a book as large as the Bible. The job of hand painting books was left to monks tucked away in monasteries. These books were incredibly valuable and they were needed in every church as the Bible as was read or allowed at mass every day. Number 8. Number 8 in the list of myths about the Middle Ages. Starving poor myth. No, the poor were kept in a state of near starvation. Starving poor. This is completely false. Peasants, those who worked in manual work, peasants would have had fresh porridge and bread daily with beer to drink. In addition, each day would have an assortment of dried or cured meats, cheeses, and fruits and vegetables from their area. Poultry, chicken, ducks, pigeons, and geese were not uncommon on the peasants' dinner tables. Number 7. Thatched roofs myth. Peasants had thatched roofs with animals living in them. First of all, the thatched roofs of medieval dwellings were woven into a tight mat. They were not just bundles of straw and sticks thrown on top of the house. Animals would not easily have been able to get inside the roof. And considering how concerned the average middle ager was, if an animal did get inside, they would be promptly removed, just as we removed birds or other smaller creatures that enter our homes today. Number 6. Smelly people myth. People didn't bath in the Middle Ages, therefore they smelled bad. Not only this is a total myth, it is so widely believed that it has given rise to a whole other series of myths, such as the false belief that church incense was designed to hide the stink of so many people in the one place. In fact, the incense was part of the church's ritual due to its history coming from the Jewish religion, which also used incense in its sacrifices. Number 5, peasant life. Myth number 5, peasant lived in a life of drudgery and back-breaking work. In fact, while peasants in the Middle Ages did work hard, tilling the fields was the only way to ensure you could eat. They had regular festivals, religions, and secular, which involved dancing, drinking, games, and tournaments. The myth number 4, violence everywhere. The Middle Ages were a time of great violence. This is a myth. While there was violence in the Middle Ages, just as there had always been, there were no equals to our modern Stalin, Hitler, and Mao. Most people lived in their lives without experiencing violence. Myth number 3, oppressed women. Women were oppressed in the Middle Ages. This is another myth number 3. In the 1960s and 70s, the idea that women were oppressed in the Middle Ages flourished. In fact, all we need to do is think of a few significant women from the period to see that is not true at all. Saint Joan of Arc was a young woman who was given full control of the French army. Her downfall was political and would have occurred whether she were male or female. Myth number 2, flat earth. Myth. People in the Middle Ages believed that earth was flat. This is another myth. Furthermore, people did not believe the earth was the center of the universe. The famous monk Copernicus dealt a death blow to that idea without being punished well before Galileo was tried to hearsay for claiming that it proved the Bible was wrong. The last myth which happened in Middle Ages is which was there in Middle Ages is number 1, crude and ignorant. People of the Middle Ages were crude and ignorant. This is another myth. Thanks largely to Hollywood movies, many people believe that the Middle Ages were full of religious superstition and ignorance. But in fact, leading historians deny that. There is another evidence of this. Science and philosophy blossomed at that time, partly due to the introduction of universities all over the Europe. So these are the top 10 myths about the Middle Ages. In this video, let us see the top 10 fascinating secrets taken to the grave. Number 10, Axel Ellensen, 1884 to 1964, he lived in between. So Ellensen started as an alfalfa farmer and started grafting and shaping tree trunks as a hobby. He would later, over a period of decades, train trees to grow into shapes of his own design. He experimented with birch, ash, elm, and weeping willows, making loops, hearts, chairs, spiral staircases, zigzags, rings, bird cages, towers, picture frames, and ladders. Interesting fact is, in 1985, after the tree circus went out of business, the trees were bought by millionaire Michael Bonfante and transplanted in his amusement park, Gilroy Gardens in Gilroy, California. Number 9, Jerome, who lived in between 1842 1912. So fascinating secrets taken to the grave. This is a second person, number 9. So on September 8, 1863, a fair-skinned stranger believed to be in his 20s was found by two fishermen at Sandy Cove in Digby County, Canada. Both of the man's legs had been freshly amputated, and a jug of water and some bread had been placed nearby. The man was unable or unwilling to speak, and is said to have uttered no more than two or three words after being found. One of the words was though thought to have been Jerome, and he was soon given that name. Jerome was filled with rage when certain words were spoken. So, interesting fact is Jerome continues to be part of the collective psyche of the community where he was found. A residence for the handicapped has been named after him. Songs have been written about him, and he has been depicted in painting and a film. Number 8, the female stranger who lived in between 1893 to 1793 to 1816. During a fall of 1816 in Alexandria, Virginia, two people, a man and his wife, walked into the Gadsby's Tavern Hotel. The woman was ill, and it was thought she was suffering from typhoid fever. The woman's condition continued to deteriorate despite being attended by one of the Alexandria's doctors. Mm, Several days after the oath was taken, the female stranger died, and to this day, no one knows her identity. Before disappearing, her husband commissioned an excellent headstone and buried her at St. Paul's Cemetery in Virginia. Interesting fact is the engraving on the headstone reads, okay. Number 7, the Leatherman, his son who lived in between 1839 to 1889. The Leatherman was a wandering vagrant who traveled in an endless 365-mile circle between the Connecticut and Hudson rivers. He was fluent in French but communicated mostly with grunts and gestures, and dressed in crudely stitched leather from his hat to his shoes. He picked up cigar butts along his way and gratefully accepted offerings of fresh tobacco or cigars that townsfolk would give him as he walked silently through their villages. Interesting fact is the Leatherman's tombstone reads final resting place of Jules Bagley of Lyons, France. The Leatherman, however, the story published in the newspaper that claimed to know his real name was later retracted. According to researchers, his identity still remains unknown. Number 6, Arne Birling, who lived in between 1905 to 1986. Arne Birling was Swedish mathematician and professor of mathematics. In 1940, he broke the German code used for strategic military communications. When Berling was asked how he broke the code, and he replied, "A magician does not reveal his secrets." Interesting fact is, Berlin's code breaking allowed Swedish authorities to know about operations Barbarossa before it occurred. Number 5, James Black, who lived in between 1800 and 1872. James Black was an Arkansas blacksmith and the creator of the original Bowie knife designed by Jim Bowie. Bowie was already famous for knife fighting from his 1827 Sunbar duel. Interesting fact is, in 1839, shortly after Black's wife's death, he was nearly blinded when his father-in-law and former partner broke into his home and attacked him with a club, having objected to his daughter having married Black years earlier. After the attack, Black was no longer able to continue in his trade. Number 4. Edward Leedscanin, who lived between 1887 and 1951. Edward Leedscanin was a Latvian immigrant to the United States and an amateur sculptor. He single-handedly built the monument known as Coral Castle in Florida and is also known as his unusual theories on magnetism. The interesting fact is Billy Idol wrote and recorded the song Sweet 16 and filmed the video in the Coral Castle. The song was inspired by the story of Leeds Kalnin's former love, Agnes Cuff, who is believed the to be the main reason Leeds Kalnin built the Coral Castles. Number 3. Johann Bessler in 1680 to 1745. Johann Bessler was born in Juttau, Germany and built a machine that he claimed was self-moving. By 1717, he had convinced thousands of people from the ordinary to the most prominent that he had indeed discovered the secret of a self-sustaining mechanism. Interesting fact is, recently a series of coded features has been discovered among various papers published by Bessler. He constructed a variety of codes from very simple, very complex, which could in time collected together reveal his secret. Next, number 2, Benjamin Franklin, who lived between 1706 to 1790. Benjamin Franklin is one of the most well-known founding fathers of the United States. Other talents include author, painter, satirist, political theorist, politician, scientist, inventor, civic activist, statesman, and diplomat. Interesting fact, in 1752, when William was 21, he assisted his father in the famed kite experiment. William later became a steadfast loyalist throughout the Revolutionary War, despite his father's role as one of the most prominent patriots during the conflict. Differences, though, they were two apart. The last and the number 1 is Antonio Stradivari, who lived between 1644 to 1737. Stradivari was an Italian crafter of stringent instruments such as violins, cellos, guitars, and harps. For centuries, scientists and historians have tried to figure out Stradivari's secret to his instrument making. Interesting fact is, it is estimated that Stradivari made around 1100 instruments. Today, only 650 instruments remain, including approximately 500 violins. So, these are the top 10 fascinating secrets taken to the grave. In this video, let us see the top 10 things you didn't know the ancients had. So, number 10, cosmetics. Roman women would put metal compounds on their faces in order to enhance their color. Tin oxide or lead oxide was used as a paling agent. Arsenic as a rough or blush. The charcoal was used as eyeliner. Romans also were the first to use a pocket mirror. Number 9, odometer. Although first used effectively by the Greeks in their measurements between cities, The Romans employed a very simple cot odometer that had 4-foot wheels. Each time the wheel completely turned, a pin would engage a cogwheel and notch out of its 400 teeth. Each time said cogwheel turned, the cart had travelled 1 Roman mile. Number 8. Flamethrower. The ancient Byzantines first used flamethrowers. Flamethrowers. Flamethrower is as a naval device. Naval device. They used as a naval device, usually to set alight the rigging and the sails of an enemy vessel. Although handled devices were cumbersome and dangerous, naval ones were very much more efficient. Working on a simple siphon pump concept, they would be pumped and the action would pull flammable liquid out of a reservoir tank, forcing it past an open flame, igniting the spray in a lethal barrage of a panic inducing inferno. Number 7. Medicines. There is much archaeological and historical evidence to support the use of complex medications and medical procedures within the ancient world. Honey was used as a topical antiseptic. Honeysuckle, often for spleen problems, horsehair for stitches, fine needles for cataract corrective surgery, and maggots for wound cleaning as they eat dead tissue. Most medical procedures used today have not changed significantly in several thousand years. So, these are the medicines were available even in ancient times also that we don't know now. Next thing, number 6, biological weapons. With the increase in medical knowledge through the ages, there has also been a markedly increased reverse engineering of the same knowledge to produce biologically based welfare warfare tactics. In medieval times, besieging armies would hurl rotting carcasses into a city with catapults and trebuchet. Longer ago, there is evidence that plagued prisoners were thrown into rivers and streams leading to a city, poisoning its water supply and demoralizing the defending forces. Number 5. Heated indoor swimming pools. The baths of Caracalla were on one of the largest bathing complexes built in ancient Rome. The both baths boasted both heated and cooled rooms, heated and cooled baths, and a gymnasium for sports, and a hat check room where garments and personal effects were held under guard by a slave. Number 4, postal system. Ancient postal systems were normally used either for official business conducted by the government or by the military. They were often the fastest form of information conductivity available. Number 3, concrete. The Romans are credited with inventing modern concretes as a building material. It was a completely revolutionary material at the time. It was lightweight, extremely strong, dried underwear, and highly pliable when wet. This is a concrete. And next thing is number 2, mechanical astrological calculator was there in ancient times also that we don't know now. The earliest known example of a mechanical calculator used in the calculation of astronomical objects is the Antikythera mechanism. Its gears were used to compute the position of the sun, the moon, and possibly other astrological objects. The last one, number one, glassware. The earliest known use of glassware occurred in ancient Mesopotamia. Its use were later copied and refined by several civilizations, including but not limited to the Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians. So these are the top 10 things we didn't know, but the ancients had already at that time. In this video, let us see the top 10 common historical myths. Number 10, Abner doubly invented baseball. This very common myth of baseball credits double day with inventing the game, supposedly in Elihu Finney's cow pasture in Cooperstown, New York in 1839. In 1905, a committee was appointed to investigate the origin of the game. Their conclusion was the first scheme for playing baseball, according to the best evidence obtained to date, was devised Abner Doubleday at Cooperstown, New York in 1839. In fact, the conclusion was based on the testimony of one man who was of questionable credibility. Jeff Idleson of the Baseball Hall of Fame has said that baseball was not really invented anywhere. But as far as history is concerned, the first written rules of baseball were penned by Alexander Joy Cartwright for the baseball club, the Knickerbocker. The number 9, the Colossus of Rhodes. Most ancient and even modern paintings of the now long gone ancient wonder of the world, the Colossus of Rhodes, show him standing the straddling the harbor entrance with ships entering the port beneath his legs. The Colossus was a statue of the Greek god Helios, built between 292 and 280 BC, and standing at a height of 100 feet. Number 8, witches were burned in Salem. In 1692 and 1693, anti witch mania hit Salem, Massachusetts, resulting in a series of trials that led to the deaths of 20 accused witches. Over 150 people were tried for the crime of witchery. Number 7 in the list of top 10 historical myths. Number 7, Lizzie Borden took an axe. Unfortunately, this myth rears its ugly head quite often, and often no amount of effort is sufficient to disapprove it to the true believers. First of Lizzie, she is famous through the children's poem. In fact, her father was axed 11 times and her stepmother 18 or 19. But that is not the real myth. The real myth is the belief that Lizzie Borden committed the crime at all. Number 6, Salome wanted John the Baptist killed. The Bible tells the tale of Herod executing John the Baptist and giving his head as a gift to his daughter in reward for her dance at his birthday. Most people mistakenly believe that Salome, the daughter, requested this out of anger for John refused her advances. This popular myth has been seen in opera, poetry, and painting. Number 5. Edison invented the light bulb. In fact, Thomas Edison not only did not invent the light bulb, he did not invent many of the things attributed to him. His straight business skills enabled him to steal, improve, and patent many ideas before their original inventors were able to. He was, in addition, a ruthless man who attempted to discredit other inventors in order to gain popularity for his own. Number 4. Pope John. This myth tells us that a young woman dressed as a priest and went to Rome to study. Eventually, she became Pope but gave birth to a child while in a papal procession, causing the crowds to kill her by stoning. In fact, there never was a Pope John. The recent resurgence in the belief in the myth is most likely the result of anti Catholic and feminist wishful thinking, according to Philip Jenkins, author of the New Anti Catholicism. Number 3. Lady Godiva rode naked. Lady Godiva was an Anglo Saxon noble woman who is supposed to have ridden through the streets of Coventry naked in order to force her husband Leofric 968 to 1057 to remove an unfair tax on his tenants. Both she and her husband were very generous to the poor and religious institutions in their time. In 1043, Leofric founded and endowed a Benedict- Benedictine monastery at Coventry, and it is believed that his wife Godiva was the primary investigator of this. Next thing is number 2. Let them eat cake. According to popular myth, Queen Mary was heard to say the misattribution and perpetuation of this myth is most likely the result of anti-royal propaganda following revolution in which she and her husband were murdered. Number 1. Nero fiddled while Rome burned. From July 18 to July 1964 AD, the Great Fire of Rome occurred. The popular myth surrounding this event is that Nero played the fiddle while the watched Rome burn and later benefited from its burning using cleared land for his new palace. Incidentally, the violin would not be invented for a full 1,000 years after the Great Fire of Rome. So, these are the top 10 common historical myths. In this video, let us see the top 10 ancient inventions. So, number 10, the wheel, 5000 BC. When talking about ancient inventions, the wheel is one of that always comes to the mind, but it is actually relatively young compared to some of the other items on this list. It was most likely invented in Sumer, which is now Iraq, in 5000 BC. It eventually spread across the Indus Valley civilization by 3000 BC. Interestingly, wheels only occur in the nature in microscopic form, so its invention was not the result of imitating objects from the natural environment. So, number 9 in the list of ancient inventions, number 9, twisted rope, 17,000 BC. Rope has been used by humans since prehistoric times. It was used in hunting, lifting, and even climbing. The first ropes would have been vines, which were eventually twisted together for increased durability. Fragments of man made twisted rope were discovered in caves in France dating to 15,000 BC. The ancient Egyptians developed tools for rope making around 4000 BC. Number 8, musical instruments, 50,000 BC. The first instruments were flutes made of bone, mammoth tusks to be exact. Fragments of these instruments have been found in caves dating back to 43,000 years BC. More recently, bone flutes dating from 9000 BC were in such good condition that they could be played. Number 7, the boat, 60,000 BC. Humans began to travel by boat around 60,000 BC, and archaeological evidence shows that the ancestors of the Australian Aboriginal traveled across the Lombok Strait to Australia in 50,000 BC. Number 6, pigments, 4 lakh, 4 lakh BC. Pigments have been used since 4 lakh BC for body decoration and painting, such as cave painting. Naturally occurring pigments such as iron oxide and ozone were the first to be used, and there have even been discoveries of equipment for grinding paints from the same period. So, number 5, spears, 4 lakh BC. Because wood does not preserve well, the estimate that a man used spears 4 lakh years ago is extremely conservative, with some anthropologists suggesting that we may have been using them as long as 5 million years ago. Number 4, clothing, 5 lakh to 1 lakh BC. The earlier clothing used by man was made of fur, leather, and plant life. It was initially used for protection from the elements, but was eventually used for decorative purposes also. Interestingly, analysis of human body lice, which require clothing to survive, has been instrumental in dating our use of clothing, as the fragile nature of ancient cloth means that no examples survive from our earliest days. Number 3, housing, 5 lakh BC. Primitive man used caves for shelter and even for religious uses. But from 5 lakh BC, we began to build huts. A fascinating archaeological discovery in Tokyo uncovered the house built with 10 posts forming an irregular pentagon shape, as well as numerous stone tools. Number 2, fire, 10 lakh BC. Fire is perhaps the most important discovery of man because it dramatically reduced the chances of illness from bad food and allowed our ancient ancestors to clear large areas through controlled fires. Last, number 1 is knife, 25 lakh to 14 lakh BC. The first knives were made by flaking rocks. It is possible that the same technique may have been used to produce knives from other materials, but none have survived. Archaeologists discovered the oldest group of stone tools called Olduan, which date to 1.5 million BC. So these are the top 10 ancient inventions were there. In this video, let us see the top 10 inventions of the Middle Ages. Number 10, heavy plough, 5th century AD. While primitive ploughs had been in use since perhaps the late Stone Age, They were usually fragile and ill suited for heavy soils. Moreover, the only way to adjust the depth of a furrow was the plowman to physically lift the plows as it cut. Number 9. Tidal mills, 7th century AD. Tidal mills are driven by the tidal rise and fall of water and are thus more efficient than the mills that are strictly on the flow of water from streams and rivers. A body of water affected by tides is dammed, and a one-way sluice gate allows for water to enter a mill pond with the high tide. Number 8. Hourglass, 9th century AD. The hourglass was one of the first portable and reusable methods of determining time, fairly accurate and highly versatile. Hourglasses could be employed in a variety of places, most importantly at sea, where timekeeping was a vital necessity. Number 7. Blast Firenze, 12th century AD. The Cistis- Cistercian monks, known for their skills in metallurgy, and are believed to be responsible for transmitting the technological know-how behind the blast furnace, with every monastery possessing a factory and water system to drive the missionary therein. Number 6. Liquor, 12th century AD. While true distillation dates back to Babylon of the 4th millennium BC, it was not until the time of the Muslim alchemists in the 8th and 9th centuries that alcohol distillation. Number 5. Eyeglasses, 13th century. Historians argue whether lenses of eyeglasses were first developed in the West or in China, but in any case, they appear in the 13th century and are first remarked upon in print by Roger Bacon. Number 4. Mechanical clock, 13th century AD. No one is certain when the mechanical clock was first invented, but it's assumed that their earliest uses were in monasteries to call the monks to prayer. Number 3. Spinning wheel, 13th century AD. It's believed that the spinning wheel has its own origins in India, though this is uncertain. At any rate, it came to Europe in the Middle Ages and replaced the handheld drafts and handheld distaffs. Number 2. Quarantine, 14th century AD. The first quarantine we know of occurred in Venice in the 14th century and was, of course, an attempt to stem the spread of the plague. Ships arriving from the east were held in isolation for a period of time sufficient to indicate whether plague was aboard, and if so, to allow it to dissipate. Last one, number 1, is printing press of Gutenberg, 15th century AD. While the Chinese had first used movable type and paper, it was not until the development of Gutenberg's press that the process became mechanized and allowed for true mass dissemination of the printed word. So these are the top 10 inventions of the Middle Ages. In this video, let us see the top 10 historical oddities, strange things you don't know. Number 10. Before the Boston Tea Party, the British actually lowered tea taxes, not raised them. Number 9. Abel Tasman discovered Tasmania, New Zealand, and Fiji on his first voyage, but managed to completely miss mainland Australia. Number 8. When the American Civil War started, Confederate Robert E. Lee owned no slaves. Union General U.S. Grant did. Number 7. Kaiser William II, Tsar Nicholas II, and George V were all grandchildren of Queen Victoria. Number 8 oddity is oddity number 6. Strange thing number 6, that is Joseph Stalin once studied to be a priest. Number 5, Henry Kissinger and Yasser Arafat won the Nobel Peace Prize. Gandhi never did. Number 4, the Constitution of the Confederate State of America banned the slave trade. Number 3, the D in a D Day stands for day. So it's a day. Number 2, a New Orleans man hired a pirate to rescue Napoleon from his prison on St. Helena. Number 1, in 1839, the US and Canada fought the bloodless war of pork and beans. These are the 10 oddities we don't know which happened in the history of the world. So, in this video, let us see the top 10 fascinating buildings never built. Number 10, Hotel Attraction. Designed in 1908 for New York City, Hotel Attraction was to be the tallest building in New York at the time and was designed by architect Antoni Gaudi. The planned total height was 1181 feet and was probably unrealistic for its time. Little is known about the origins of Hotel Attraction and was unknown until 1956 when a report called The New World called Gaudi was published. Interesting fact is the drawings by Gaudi of the attraction hotel had actually been proposed as a basis for the rebuilding of the ground zero project in Manhattan. Number 9. The number 9 building, fascinating buildings in the list of fascinating buildings never built. Number 9 is the Illinois, designed in 1956 for Chicago, Illinois. The Illinois was a proposed mile high, 5,280 feet skyscraper envisioned by Frank Lloyd Wright. Wright believed that it would have been technically possible to construct such a building even at that time it was proposed. Interesting fact is a number of problems occurred in writing Wright's design of the Illinois. Number 8, Fourth Grace, designed in 2002 for Liverpool, England. Despite that many believe was the ugliest of all the proposals, architect Bill Alsop entered the winning design for this project and named it the Cloud. The project's name, Fourth Grace, is due to the development being located adjacent to the three historic buildings at the Pierhead site known as the Three Graces. The interesting fact is the fourth grace was designed for office space, a 107 room hotel, and 50,000 square feet of community facilities, including a bar, restaurant, and a viewing gallery. Number 7, Beacon of Progress, designed around 1891 for Chicago, Illinois. Plans called for 1500 foot stone tower in Jackson Park, Chicago, on the site of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Interesting fact is the design called for an amphitheater at the base of seated 1 lakh people and sweeping piers that would extend into Lake Michigan for regattas. Number 6. Ville Contemporain, designed in 1922 for Paris, France. The Ville Contemporain was to house 3 million inhabitants and was designed by the French Swiss architect Le Corbusier. The centerpiece of this plan was a group of 60 story scrapers built on steel frames and esca- encased in huge satin curtain walls of glass. Interesting fact is for a number of years, French officials had been unsuccessful in dealing with the squalor of the growing Persian slums. Number 5. Tatlin's Tower, designed around 1917 for St. Petersburg, Russia. Tatlin's Tower would have dwarfed the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The tower was to be built from industrial materials, iron, glass, and steel. It was envisioned as a towering symbol of modernity. Interesting fact is at the base of the structure of was a rotating cube designed as a venue for lectures, conferences, and legislative meetings. Number 4. Shimizu Mega City Pyramid. Designed in 2004 for Tokyo, Japan, the Shimizu Mega City Pyramid was a proposed project for construction of a massive pyramid over Tokyo Bay in Japan. The structure would be 12 times higher than the Great Pyramid at Giza and would house 750,000 people. The interesting fact is the reason this project cannot be built in the design of the megacity pyramids relies on the future availability of super strong lightweight materials that are currently unavailable. Number 3. Ultima Tower, designed in 1991 for San Francisco, California. Architect Eugene Sui originally conceived the idea of the Ultima Tower as part of a study of a compact urban area of San Francisco. The structure would utilize atmospheric energy conversion by converting the difference in atmospheric pressure at the top and bottom of the structure into electrical power. Interesting fact is the structure's shape is modeled after the tallest structure not made by man, African termite nests. Number 2. Place of Soviets, designed in 1933 for Moscow, Soviet Union. In the palace of Soviets had been built, it would have become the world's tallest structure. It was to be built on the site of the demolished Cathedral of Christ the Savior. Interesting fact is the construction was actually started on this project in 1937 and was terminated because of the German invasion. The last and number 1 is Werkschelle, the Great Dome, designed around 1930 for Berlin, Germany. The Werkschelle People's Hall was a huge monumental building planned by Adolf Hitler and his architect Albert Speer. It was to be the capital's most important and impressive building in terms of its size and symbolism and the architectural centerpiece in Berlin. Interesting fact is what makes the Volkswagen even more interesting is the illustration plans show a pedestal with the Nazi eagle figure. So these are the Top 10 fascinating buildings never built. In this video, let us see the top 10 ancient mysteries. So, number 10, Rongo Rongo. Everyone knows about the giant stone heads of Easter Island. Less well known, however, is that the Easter Islanders evidently possessed a written language in the form of a hieroglyphic script called Rong, Rongo Rongo. This is itself a curiosity, as any form of written language was apparently unknown to the neighboring oceanic societies. Number 9, Lost City of Helike. Helike was a city in the Peloponnese mentioned by the Greek travel writer Pausanias in the 2nd century AD. According to Pausanias, the city capital of the Aegean League and a center of worship dedicated to the god Poseidon had been devastated by a powerful earthquake and tsunami, which erased almost all traces of it in a single night. Number 8, the bog bodies. Unearthed in and around the wetlands of North Europe, the bog bodies are hundreds of mummified corpses, many remarkably preserved, some of which date back as far as 2000 years. Some of the bodies show the clear indication of having suffered torture, and some are apparent victims of strangulation, throat cutting, and other methods of execution. Number 7, fall of the Minoans. Over 4,000 years ago, the island of Crete, Crete was inhabited by people who were known as Minoans after the legendary king Minos, who was supposed to have ruled Aegean at the time. The Minoans were contemporaries of the other great ancient civilization of the Near East, Egypt, Sumer Babylon, and the Hittites. Tradition says that they ruled a trading empire centered on the islands of the eastern Mediterranean and mainland Greece. Number 6, the Karnak Stones. The Karnak Stones are examples of ancient monument building that may share much in common with the other megalithic sites and stone circle. The most famous of which is Stonehenge. The Karnak stones, however, are some 3,000 megaliths set up in straight lines near the coast of northwest France, covering some 7 miles. Number 5. Who was Robin Hood? There are various figures mentioned in historical roles who could have been the basis of the legend of Robin Hood. Among them, a man known as Hobbe Hood or Robert Hood of Yorkshire. The search for a historical Robin Hood is made all the more difficult by later embellishments to the story and additions of characters that obscure the time and place where he may have lived. Number 4, the last Roman legion. Legend has it that a number of Roman soldiers escaped the defeat of the Roman general Crassus at the hands of the Persians. These legionaries supposedly went eastward and were said to have founded a town near the Gobi Desert. Number 3, the Voynich manuscript. The so-called Voynich manuscript is a document of unknown origin and authorship, written in unknown alphabet and language. It is believed to date from the Middle Ages. Number 2, the mystery number 2 from Middle Ages, the Tarim mummies. The In the 1990s, there was a discovery of some highly unusual 2,000-year-old mummies in the Tarim basin of Western China. The mummies, which were subjected to DNA testing, were Caucasian in appearance, with blonde hair and long noses. Last and number 1 is the disappearance of the Indus Valley civilization. The Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappans, was an advanced culture that coexisted with the great civilizations of Mesopotamia. It's believed that the societies stretched from what is today Western India to Afghanistan, but they are largely shrouded in mysteries since their language has been deciphered. So these are the top 10 ancient mysteries. So top 10 great ancient Chinese inventions. Number 10, roll planting. Feudal period, 6th century BC. The Chinese started planting crops in rows sometimes in the 6th century BC. This technique allows the crops to grow faster and stronger. It facilitates more efficient planting, watering, weeding, and harvesting. There is also documentation that they realized that as the wind travel over rows of plants, there is less damage. This obvious development was not instituted in the Western world for another 2002 years. Number 9, in the list of ancient Chinese inventions, number 9, compass. Feudal period, 4th century BC. The Chinese developed a lodestone compass to indicate a direction sometimes in the 4th century BC. These compasses were south pointing and were primarily used on land as a divination tools and direct finders. Written in the 4th century BC in the book of the Devil Valley Master, it is written that lodestone makes iron come or it attracts it. Number 8, and the seed drill, Han Dynasty. So this seed drill is used to plant seeds into the soil at a uniform depth and cover it. Without this tool, seeds are tossed by hand over the ground, resulting in waste and inefficient, uneven growth. Chinese farmers were using seed drills as easy as the 2nd century BC. So, number 7, iron plows, Han Dynasty. One of the major developments of the ancient Chinese agriculture was the use of the iron moldboard plows. Though probably first developed in the 4th century BC and promoted by the central government, they were popular and common by the Han Dynasty. Number 6, deep drilling, Han Dynasty. By the 1st century BC, the Chinese had developed and technology for deep drilling boreholes. Some of these reached depths of 4,800 feet. They used a technology that would be easily recognizable as a modern engineer and layperson alike. Derricks would rise as much as 180 feet above the borehole. So this is about deep drilling. Next thing is number 5, ship's rudder. Chinese naval developments occurred far earlier than similar Western technology. The first recorded use of rudder technology in the West was in 1180. Chinese pottery models of sophisticated slung axial rudders, enabling the rudder to be lifted in shallow waters, dating from the 1st century, have been found. So, number 4, harnesses for horses. Age of division. Throat harnesses have been used throughout the world to harness horses to carts and sleds. These harnesses press back on the neck of the horse, thus limiting the full length of the animal. Number 3, porcelain Sui dynasty. Porcelain is a very specific kind of ceramic produced by the extreme temperatures of a kiln. The materials fuse and form a glass and mineral compound known for its strength, transience, and beauty. Invented during the Sui dynasty and perfected during the Tang dynasty. So next thing is number 2, toilet paper. One of the first recorded accounts of using hygienic paper was during the Sui dynasty in 589. In 851, an Arab traveler reported that the Chinese used paper in place of water to cleanse themselves. By the late 1300s, approximately 7,20,000 sheets per year were produced in packages of 1,000 to 10,000 sheets. The last and number 1 is printing, movable type, Song dynasty. Paper, having been invented by the Chinese, is well known and is one of the great Chinese inventions. The recipe for this paper still exists and can be followed by today's artisans. In 868, the first printed book using full page woodcuts was produced. About 100 years later, the innovations of Biesheng were described. So these are the top 10 great ancient Chinese inventions. In this video, let us see the top 10 government in exile. Number 10, Belarusian National Republic. The BNR was created as a pro-German buffer state against revolutionary Russia in 1918. The BNR was never a real state, as it had no constitution, no military, and no defined territory. When German troops withdrew from Belarus, the region was quickly overrun by the Red Army, and the BNR Provisional Council went into exile to facilitate an anti-communist movement there. Its government still exists, though it is unrecognized and in exile in Toronto. Number 9, Republic of Cabinda. Cabinda is a region located in West Central Africa between Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Cabinda's claim to independence from Angola trace back to its days as a Portuguese protectorate. When Angola achieved independence in the 1960s, the exiled Cabinda government declared independence as well. though it went unrecognized. Number 8, the Crown Council of Ethiopia. The governing body once acted as a board of advisors for the reigning emperors of Ethiopia. When the monarchy was driven out in 1975, members of the Crown Council claimed that the emperorship still existed and was thus the only legitimate head of state. Number 7, the Progress Party of Equatorial Guinea. The PPGE was founded as a pro-market, pro-democratic party in Equatorial Guinea in West Africa after a lengthy period of repressive military authoritarianism. In response, the party declared a government in exile in Madrid, where it is still located. Number 6, Monarchy of Lao. The monarchy of Laos traces its origins to the Consolidated Kingdom of Laos, formed in 1946. In 1975, the monarchy was dissolved by the communist regime and was sent into exile. Its headquarters is located in the US. Number 5, NCGUB. The NCGUB, National Coalition Government of Union of Burma, was formed in 1995 at a convention in Bummervik, Sweden. It is currently based in Rockville, Maryland. Number 4, Republic of Serbian Krajina. This government was formed during the Yugoslav Civil War of the 1990s but was reinstated in 2005. Serbian Krajina was formerly a self-proclaimed Serbian state within Croatia. The RSK exiled government is headquartered in Belgrade. Number 3, Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. Chechnya is a breakaway province in the northern Caucasus and the site of two devastating wars between Chechen separatists and Russian Federation. Number 2, Monarchy of Iran. The modern Iranian monarchy was established in 1501 and was presided over by the Shahanshah, the equivalent of an emperor. Through much of its history, Iran was ruled by an absolute monarchy. He currently lives in Potomac, Maryland. The last, number 1, is Central Tibetan Administration. Tibet is a region under the administration of People's Republic of China, a situation considered by the Central Tibetan Administration to be an unlawful occupation. The exiled Tibetan government is headed by Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama. The CTA claims jurisdiction over those regions referred to as historic Tibet. These are the top 10 governments in exile. In this video, let us see the top 10 lesser used or known forms of government. Number 10, Total Iranianism, total rule. Total Iranianism is when a country is ruled by an ideology that penetrates every nook and cranny of its society. The regime is often headed by a cult of personality type leader. The government builds up control through eliminating and confining anything that acts independently of the state until it regulates and enforces nearly every aspect of public and private life, giving themselves power through propaganda, control over media, enemy, restricting freedom discussion, mass surveillance, and use of terror tactics. Number 9. Theocracy, ruled by God. Ruled by God or deity, the state is governed by an individual that is divinely guided, or more often an institutional representative. The local laws and rules are set by a dominant religious leader on behalf of God. That's about theocracy ruled by God. Number 8, exila, exilarchy, ruled by ethnic or religious diaspora. The exilarchy rules a religious or ethnic group rather than the place the group originates from. The leader only has power through cultural and honorary means and only rules the group's followers who are ultimately governed by their host countries. Number 7, monarchism, minimal statism. Not far off from anarchism, monarchists believe government should be limited to protecting the basic right of life, liberty, and property. They endorse a night watchman state, which is limited to court, police, and military. Number 6, ethnocracy. Ethnocracy ruled by a race. Ethnocracies are used to make one race, religious group, or language politically dominant, with all other issues being subordinate to their cause. Number 5, kleptocracy ruled by thieves. Similar to plutocracy, the kleptocracy is ruled by a few people of wealth. In this system, however, the rich get richer by embezzling from its citizens. A kleptocracy degrades a people's quality of life, taking money that is often supposed to go to schools, hospitals, roads, and other public services. Number 4, plutocracy, ruled by a wealthy. Economic inequality at its finest, the plutocracy gives power to the most wealthy. A few of the places known for their plutocracies are ancient Greece, Carthage, Italian merchant republics of Venice and Florence, and Genoa. In recent times, there is no true plutocracy, although many countries are criticized for showing similar signs. Number 3, logocracy ruled by words, a more ironic or parody government. A logocracy is a government ruling through words described in Washington Irving's 1807 work. Salman Gundi is a logocracy is a government that uses a tricky wording to control its people. Number 2, technocracy, governed by technical design making. Technocracy is a government run by scientists and engineers, placing the most knowledgeable professionals in charge of their specialized area to ensure administrative functions are carried out efficiently. Last, number 1, demarch, ruled by people. A government run by randomly selected citizens is called a citizen's jury. The system is similar to democracy without the need for elections. Proposed by Australian philosopher John Burnham, this style of government has never actually been used. So, these are the top 10 lesser used or unknown forms of government. In this video, let us see the top 10 myths about the Vikings. Number 10, one nation. Misconception is the Vikings were a nation. The Vikings are not one nation but different groups of warriors, explorers, and merchants led by a chieftain. During the Vikings age, Scandinavia was not separated into Denmark and Norway and Sweden as it is today. So, number 9, wild, dirty people. Misconception: the Vikings were all dirty, wild-looking people. But in many movies and cartoons, the Vikings are shown as dirty, wild-looking, savage men and women. But in reality, the Vikings were quite vain about their appearance. In fact, combs, tweezers, razors, and ear spoons are among some of the most frequent artifacts from Viking Age excavations. Number 8, big and blonde. Misconception: the Vikings were all big and blonde. The Vikings are often shown as big, bulging guys with long blonde hair, but historical records show that the average Viking man was about 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was not especially tall for the time. Blonde hair was seen as ideal in the Viking culture, and many Nordic men bleached their hair with a special soap. Number 7, skull cups. Misconception: the Vikings drank from skull cups. The origin of this legend is Ole Worm's Reiner Cynical literature Antiquism from 1636, in which he wrote that Danish warriors drank from the curved branches of skulls, that is horns, which was probably mistranslated in Latin to mean human skulls. Number 6, crude weapons. Misconception: the Vikings used crude, unsophisticated weapons. Vikings are often shown with crude, unsophisticated weapons such as clubs and crude axes, but the Vikings were actually skilled weaponsmiths using a method called pattern welding. The Vikings could make swords that were both extremely sharp and flexible. Number 5, hometown. Misconception: the Vikings lived only in Scandinavia. The Vikings did organize from the Scandinavia countries, but over time they started settlements in many places, reaching as far as North Africa, Russia, even North America. Next, number 4, hated by their peers. Misconception is the Vikings were hated everywhere. One could imagine that the Vikings were hated everywhere because of their raids, but it seems that they were also
respected by some. The French king Charles Third, known as Charles the Simple, gave the Vikings the land they had already settled in France. So next number three, bloodthirsty. Misconception: the Vikings were unusually bloodthirsty and barbarian. The Vikings raids were indeed very violent, but it was a violent age, and the question is whether non-Viking armies were any less bloodthirsty and barbarian. For instance, Charlemagne, who was the Vikings' contemporary, virtually exterminated the whole people of ours. Next, number two, rape and pillage. Misconception: the Vikings pillaged as their only way of living. It was actually only very small percentage of Vikings that were warriors. The majority were farmers, craftsmen, and traders. And the last number one is helmet style. Misconception: the Vikings wore helmets with horns. This must be the biggest misconception about Vikings, but the fact remains there are no records of such helmets having ever existed. All descriptions of Viking helmets dating to the Viking age show them with no horns, and the only authentic Viking helmet that has ever been found does not have them either. So, these are the top 10 myths about the Vikings.